Even today, the Intel Macbook Air may surprise you. Over the last 2 years, Intel has been phased out of the Apple computer ecosystem, but this begs the question, are these computers obsolete? Let me introduce you to Diane. Diane is an interesting machine in that Diane is an Intel Macbook Air. This MacBook Air features an i5 quad-core with 8 gigs of RAM and 500 gigabytes of storage, but still not much of this outpaces the base model M1 MacBook Air. And if you upgrade it like this one is, well, none of it does. So is an Intel MacBook Air worth even half the price of an M1 Air, which starts at $1,000? You can find these Intel MacBook Airs from anywhere between $750 to $1,100. A fairly large asking price if you ask me, but, well, let's test it. First, this isn't a base model MacBook Air. For those of you who don't know or forgot, the base model MacBook Air featured an i3 with 256 gigabytes of storage with 8 gigs of RAM. This laptop features around $500 in Apple upgrades, making our MacBook come out to around the upgraded MacBook Air would be priced. As I've said already, we know this MacBook is not outright spec the same. However, we do also know that the MacBook Air was designed to be Apple's lightbook. So let's see. The MacBook Air always has been a very physically light laptop, and of course this one is no exception. Surprisingly, it only weighs around 3 pounds, and whenever it's in hand, it really doesn't feel like it. While still feeling very solid and strong, it almost feels like holding a solid sheet of metal. The laptop is extremely thin on all sides, with the thickest being on the back. Strangely, or unstrangely depending on how you look at it, this laptop only has 2 Thunderbolt ports and a headphone jack, common of laptops at the time. However, now they're back to ports. Despite the new developments, Apple still does sell a multi-port adapter for $69, along with others in that price range on other retailers. Moving to the inside of the laptop, you'll notice there's no touch bar on this MacBook. Apple never really standardized the touch bar, and they never put it on the MacBook Air before they discontinued it. But looking to either side of the keyboard reveals this Mac speaker system with 2 upward firing speakers. Below that, a decently spaced area for your wrist to rest, and between that, a fairly large trackpad. At the very top, in the middle of the screen, we can see a 720 megapixel webcam. The screen this camera is situated in is a very nice, crispy Retina IPS 2560-1600 display. Something that's keenly different about the internal design of this MacBook from the M1 Airs is this Mac actually comes with a fan attached to the CPU cooler. The drawback to this is an extremely loud, even whenever doing relatively normal tasks like multiple tabs open with maybe Discord in the background. What's more interesting is the MacBook still manages to run very hot. Stranger than that, well, this is all by design. Apple actually intended for the CPU to start clocked high, become under load, throttle, and then clock back up. This was Apple's best solution at the time to Intel's increasingly hotter and more power-hungry chips. However, all this resulted in an audible laptop essentially at all times during use. Now let's jump into the raw performance of this laptop. Starting out with Cinebench, first our multi-core score of 2351 points. Next we have our single-core score of 864. Now our Geekbench, single-core score of 1047 and multi-core score of 2663. That's great, but what do these scores actually mean? Well, quite a lot, frankly. When browsing the internet, it does fine, but even better is how well it can handle multiple programs open at once. While the fan is still very audible, it's not terrible, and well, you can easily jump around the tasks you have running in the background. With all this being said, I think we can come to the pretty fair conclusion that the MacBook Air is still a great laptop, but is it still the powerhouse that it used to be? Well, let's try gaming. Being a Mac, the gaming options are limited, of course. However, you could always install Windows, download Steam, and game that way, but for now, let's stick to Mac OS. First, Minecraft, and it wasn't terrible, but not great either. Most times in the overworld, with fairly minimal settings, I could get anywhere between 20 and 30 frames per second. In the Nether, it was slightly better, with the average being around 40 and 50. However, there was some noticeable slowdowns and a decent amount of hiccups, especially in the overworld. It was fairly manageable. But let me stop here, because Macs weren't made for gaming. Well, these Macs weren't made for gaming, so what were they made for? Well, there's typically not one use for any regular commercial laptop. I think these Macs were made for the light program heavy web user. So let's try editing a quick photo in Photoshop and we'll see how well it manages to stream a video while exporting that photo. Okay, great, right? But what about browsing the web? Well, yeah, it's not bad. In fact, it does this pretty well. So what else can we do on the web? Well, actually a lot. In fact, just about anything you could do on your conventional desktop. Using Google Docs is obviously amazing. Now, do you remember whenever I said it could handle multiple programs well. Actually, amazingly for it, whenever we're in Chrome with multiple tabs open, it holds itself together very nicely. So you could have maybe Google Drive or iCloud open in one tab as kind of your virtual file storage, and maybe Docs open in another tab for some notes, and have a Google Slideshow open to follow along. Do you see where I'm going with this? Essentially, you have a very nice Chromebook for $700, and let's be fair, no Chromebook is going to do as good as this, and even the most expensive Chromebook is $1,000, and it's still a Chromebook. I would say 1,000 American monies is too much for any Chromebook right now. The thing is, this MacBook goes for around $600 to $800, making it a fuzzy value, because for around $300 more, you could have a brand new M2 MacBook Air, which would outperform this thing, and even for an extra $300, which actually makes it worth it because you'd have your new MacBook and, well, an ever diminishing laptop if you were to make the $700 purchase. So in conclusion, is it worth it? Well, there's a complicated answer, at least in my opinion. We have answer one, which is no. At $750, these computers are simply overpriced because of how close their price is to Apple's current asking price on the base model Mac. Then you have answer two, which is yes. If you're looking for a super Chromebook in the event that you want an amazingly focused Chrome machine and you want it to integrate well with your iPhone and maybe your iPad too, and you have around $600 or $700 to spare, I can promise you it's going to be the most well-built laptop you'll find at this price point. No question, once again, $700 is a lot for this, but it's not bad. Now, do I think you should be actively seeking one of these machines? Well, no. The performance just doesn't compare at the price. Now, if you find one of these for a good price, like I said, sure, but you also need to keep in mind the small use life this machine has left. I see it holding up for maybe another 3, maybe 4 years, so the option is yours. Okay, so that was great, but I want to talk about something. We made 120 subscribers happen. I want to thank you guys so much for that. That's absolutely amazing. I mean, that's wow. So thank you guys. If you guys liked the video, feel free to leave a like, and if you didn't like it, then you can dislike it. And if you want to watch another one, well, there's probably one somewhere around here, somewhere on the screen. But seriously, thank you guys so much for 120 subscribers. That's never imagined it. Here we are. Thank you guys. You can subscribe if somewhere here if you guys liked it and want to see another one. Thank you guys so much.